Mom, just sign here. It's for the pension thing, same as always. Don't you worry. Wendell said it with the smile he used to give her as a boy, asking permission to go down to the creek. The same smile, the same little tilt of the head to the left, the same big hand laid over the paper, covering half the words like it was nothing at all. Miss Ruthie picked up the pen. It was a cheap blue ballpoint, the kind she'd bought by the dozen at the 5 and dime, the kind she'd used for 40 years marking up 3rd and 4th grade workbooks at the little schoolhouse on Troublesome Creek, out where the blacktop gives out and the ridge takes over. 40 years of blue-violet ink worked down under her fingernails, 40 years of stains that never came out, not with lye soap, not with bleach, not with the lemon juice Alma always told her to try. The stains stayed, the way things stay in a person. That pen was hers. She would remember that a great deal later on, that the pen was hers. She signed. She signed the way she always signed. The big round loop on the R, the long tail on the final H that Miss Eula Hatfield had taught her back at the normal school in Richmond in 1967. The last name Combs, firm through the C, the 2 M's rising and dipping like little foothills, trailing off soft and pale at the very end. It was a teacher's signature, the kind that goes at the bottom of report cards and county certificates and papers that actually mean something. There you go, Mom. There you go, sweetheart. Thank you. Let me fix you a little coffee. Wendell folded the paper without showing it to her, slid it into a brown folder and went off to the kitchen. Miss Ruthie heard the faucet turn on, heard the old percolator whistling like a small dog, heard Wendell humming some tune off the radio she didn't recognize, because she never did know the new ones. The new ones belonged to him. She looked down at her hands. The ink stain on her right index finger was darker than usual, like the signing itself had left more behind than what showed on the surface. The coffee was good. Wendell made it the way Everett used to, with a little sorghum stirred in. Miss Ruthie drank 2 cups and asked her son to hand her the dictionary off the shelf in the front room. It had been sitting open on S for months now. That morning's word was going to be settle. Settle. She read it out loud. To calm, to quiet, to put at ease. Pretty word, Mom? Yes, sweetheart. Pretty word. Wendell kissed her on the forehead, told her he'd be back Saturday, and left. His keys jingled out at the gate. The truck engine turned over. He pulled off down Laurel Street toward the highway that ran on to Pikeville. Miss Ruthie closed the dictionary. She stayed sitting in the green armchair in her front room, with her hands folded on her knees, looking out at the yard through the window. Out there stood an old sycamore tree, a clay pot with basil growing in it, 2 empty bird cages that used to belong to the canary that died back in 2019, and the well. The well. She looked at it a long while. She wasn't thinking any one thing in particular, or she was thinking 100 things all at once, which comes out to about the same. She thought of Everett Young, sleeves rolled up, digging the well by hand in the summer of '68. She thought of her own mother telling her once that a well in the yard is like a secret in the family. You always have to know right where it's at. You always have to mind the wellhead, never let a child lean over it alone. She thought of the field stone Everett had set with his own hands, 1 stone at a time with mortar he'd mixed himself. She thought about what was down there. What was down there belonged to her, that much she knew for certain. Now, here is where the storyteller in me ought to stop for a minute. No, better said, here is where the storyteller in me should not stop at all, because Miss Ruthie herself was not stopping. Miss Ruthie was thinking, and what she was thinking was not what it looked like. Let's take this a piece at a time. To everybody following this story, and to you listening right now, I'm going to ask one thing of you before we go on. If you have ever in your life signed a paper without reading the whole thing, a power of attorney, a loan contract, some form the bank slid across the counter, a piece of paper from a real estate office, whatever it was, tell me about it down in the comments. No names, no details, just tell me that you did it. Because what happened that morning to Miss Ruthie Combs in her little house on Laurel Street in Neon, Kentucky, has happened to half this country. And the ones who never signed anything know somebody who did. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you want to see how this one ends, because it runs long and it runs deep. And give it a like if this story grabbed you from the very first line, because that's what helps more folks find it and hear it. All right, I've asked what I needed to ask. Let's keep going. It was 11 in the morning on a Tuesday in October of 2024. Neon was quiet. Neon has been quiet ever since it emptied out, ever since the mines cut back around 2010, ever since folks started drifting off to Pikeville or up north to Dayton and Detroit to be near kin who'd already gone. Neon is a town that mostly doesn't have people in it anymore. The old company houses are still standing, the hollows are still there, the little Free Will Baptist church is still there, but the people aren't. The people left. Miss Ruthie hadn't left. She had turned 76 that August. She'd been a widow since 2006, when Everett dropped dead of a heart attack out in the yard, right there next to the well, while she was watering the basil. She had 3 children. Wendell, the oldest, ran a loan and pawn business over in Pikeville. Loretta, the middle one, married to an accountant up in Lexington. And Bobby, the baby of the family, a mechanic in Dayton, Ohio for 22 years now. Not one of them lived in Neon. Not one of them had lived in Neon since they turned 20. Neon was the place they were from, not the place they were. Miss Ruthie lived alone with a medium-sized yellow dog named Copper, who was getting on in years and hardly ever got up off the kitchen rug anymore. She drew a small teacher's pension. It was little, but it covered the gas bill, the electric, groceries, her heart medicine. Nothing extra, nothing short, just settled. That was her word for it. Settled. She had a simple life. Up at 6, water boiling for coffee, Copper's biscuit handed over, a page of the old red Webster's dictionary read out loud, the same dictionary that had belonged to the schoolhouse on Troublesome Creek and that she'd brought home when she retired in 2011, back when the school had cut down to 3 days a week and nobody was going to use it anyway. She went to the store 3 times a week. She'd say hello to Alma, her friend of a lifetime, who ran Sloane's Bakery on the square. She'd buy 2 sweet rolls, walk home, water the basil, eat something simple, watch the news on an old television set, turn in early. That was her life. That was the life her children believed she was living. And it was almost entirely true, what her children didn't know. Wendell didn't know, Loretta didn't know, Bobby didn't know. Everett, while he was alive, had known half of it. The other half she'd pieced together on her own, over 18 years of widowhood. Alma didn't know. The preacher at the church didn't know. Nobody knew. What nobody knew was that there was money down in the well. Not a fortune, not millions, not the kind of money that buys ranches or hotels or trouble, but money, and other things besides. And all of it sat down there in an old cookie tin wrapped in plastic bags, tied off with a length of wire, hanging from a heavier wire that Everett had fastened into the wellhead back in 1971, a good 4 feet above the waterline, where nobody was ever going to see it, not even with a flashlight. Because the wire was painted the same grey as the fieldstone. Everett had put the tin down there in 71. Miss Ruthie had been adding to it for 53 years, and nobody knew. But you have to hear how that tin got down that well first. Otherwise none of what came after makes any sense. And what came after is the whole point, but it doesn't hold together without this part. Back to 68. Everett Combs worked the railroad. He ran a section on the Chesapeake and Ohio line between Pikeville and the coal tipples down along the river. He was from up around Jenkins, a farmer's son, tall, thin, a thin mustache, and hands that always had black grease worked in under the nails. The grease never came out. Not with lye soap, not with bleach, not with lemon juice either. In that much his hands matched hers, only the blue of her ink and the black of his grease were 2 different things, even if both of them stayed. Miss Ruthie, who back then wasn't Miss Ruthie at all, was just Ruth Ellen, and hadn't even become Ruthie yet, was Ellie to her girlfriends at the teachers' college. She'd come up to Neon in August of 67 to do her practice year of teaching. She was 19. She'd come from down around Richmond. She'd been assigned the little one-room schoolhouse on Troublesome Creek, 14 miles out of town on a dirt road, alongside a dry fork of the creek. She met Everett at the church pie supper on the 8th of December, 67. He was 27. She was 19. They danced 3 songs, 1 Hank Williams number, 1 Kitty Wells, and a third she could never afterward recall. Everett walked her home at 11 that night, shook her hand at the door, didn't kiss her, and the next day sent his younger brother over with a bunch of mountain laurel tied up with a red ribbon. You don't buy mountain laurel, You go out and cut it yourself. Everett had cut it himself. They married in May of '68. It was a plain wedding at the Free Will Baptist Church, the dress borrowed from Everett's cousin. The meal was laid out in the yard of his folks' place up in Jenkins. A local string band played. Ruth turned 20 that August. Everett turned 28 that November. They bought the house on Laurel Street 2 months later, with a loan from the Railroad Workers' Union. The house was old, fieldstone, set right up against the alley behind the feed store. It had 3 rooms, a kitchen with a beam ceiling, a big yard with a sycamore tree, and an old well that had been dry since his grandfather's time. "I'm going to dig that well out again," Everett said the first day, standing in the yard with his hands on his hips. "There's going to be water in there, you'll see." It took him 3 months. He did it alone, mornings before he left for the tracks, evenings when he got back on his days off. He hauled out dirt, hauled out rock, hauled out an old root system with roots like a dead man's hair. He hit water on the 14th of September, same day as the old Mountain Heritage Festival, folks like to say. That night, the 2 of them got drunk on a jar of moonshine from over toward Jenkins and danced in the yard with no music at all, just the sound of the new well water echoing up from below like a bell ringing far off somewhere. Ruth carried that sound with her the rest of her life. The well gave good water for 10 years. After that, it gave less and less. By 1980, it hardly gave anything. By 1990, it had gone dry again, just a little puddle at the bottom that filled up in the rainy season and dried out again by May. But the well stayed. Everett looked after it, cleaned it out once a year, went down with a ladder and a bucket and hauled up whatever had fallen in, leaves, branches, once a dead possum, once a child's toy. One time he hauled up something else. In November of '71, Everett got home late that night. It was a Thursday. Ruth was feeding Wendell his supper, and he was 2 years old. Loretta was 4 months old and sleeping in a cradle by the stove. The house smelled of pinto beans and hot lard. Everett came in without a word of greeting. That was strange. Everett always said hello. "Evening, sugar." "Evening, sweetheart." That night he didn't say a thing. He took off his cap, sat down at the kitchen table, and set down a bundle wrapped in a khaki-colored rag. The bundle was about the size of a brick. It made a dull, metal sort of sound when he moved it. "Ellie, what happened, old man? Shut the door." Ruth shut the door, handed Wendell his plate, sat down across from Everett, and looked at him. Everett opened the rag. Inside were bundles of old bills held together with rubber bands, an envelope, and a thin gold chain with a small gold cross that Ruth had never laid eyes on before. "And that, old man, that belongs to a buddy of mine." "Which buddy?" "One who died back in '70. Charlie. Charlie Mullins ran with the crew out of Jenkins. You remember him?" Ruth remembered him. Charlie Mullins had been crushed between 2 cars in a switching accident in the Pikeville yard back in August of '70. Everett had gone to the wake, come home with red eyes and drunk half a jar of moonshine in silence. "And this here, Charlie gave it to me before, about 3 months before. He told me, Everett, if something happens to me, this is for my wife and my boys. But here's the thing, my wife doesn't know I've been putting this back. If something happens to me, you find a way, all right? But don't hand it to her all at once. Spread it out so it lasts her." "Why haven't you given it to her yet?" Everett looked at the table. "Because the widow took up with another man inside of 6 months, Ellie, and that man's the kind that doesn't ask where money comes from. And the boys aren't nothing yet, they're babies. If I give it to her, it doesn't reach the boys, it reaches him, it reaches his bottle, it reaches his card games." Ruth sat there quiet. So then, I'm going to hold on to it till the boys are grown. The oldest is 7. When he turns 18, I'll give it to him, or when he marries, or when he really needs it. But not now, not right now. And where are you going to keep it?" Everett smiled for the first time that whole night. That same night, once the children were asleep, Everett went down into the well with a ladder and a hand lantern. He carried the bundle wrapped in plastic bags, tied off with wire, inside an empty cookie tin. He also carried a length of heavy wire and a portable welder that ran off a car battery. Ruth stood up at the wellhead holding Wendell, who had woken up. Everett climbed down to about 4 feet above the water. He welded the wire into the wellhead, right where the fieldstone met the natural rock. He painted the wire the color of the stone, using paint he'd borrowed off a mason friend that same afternoon. He hung the tin from the wire, pushed it back into a gap between two stones where it sat hidden. He climbed back up. Done. And if somebody leans over and looks, you can't see it, I swear it. Even with a flashlight, you can't see it. It's the color of the stone, and if it falls, it won't fall. I welded it good, and if somebody goes looking for it— Everett looked at her a long moment. Nobody's going to go looking for it, Ellie. Nobody knows it's there, just you and me. And it's going to stay just you and me who know, all right? Not your mother, not mine, not the kids, not till it's time. And if something happens to you? Everett smiled again, but it was a different smile now. It was the smile of a man who has already thought that part through. If something happens to me, you know where it's at. You'll know what to do. Ruth didn't say anything. She nodded. That was the first time. Others followed after that. Everett added to the tin now and then, whenever he picked up overtime, whenever he sold off a piece of his father's land back in Jenkins, whenever the Christmas bonus came through, not much, just a little, but every year something more for the boys, he'd say, for whenever the boys need it. Charlie Mullins never did have boys of his own in Neon, not really. His sons grew up in Pikeville with the stepfather. Everett tried to track them down a couple of times. The older one fell in with a rough crowd and got himself killed in a bar fight back in '89. The younger one moved up north, Ohio maybe, or Michigan. Nobody ever rightly knew, and nobody heard from him again. Everett quit looking in '92. So what do we do with Charlie's money, old man? It isn't Charlie's money anymore, Ellie. Not really, then whose is it? Everett sat there thinking. It's still Charlie's, I suppose, but Charlie's boys aren't around to claim it. Then we keep it. It'll be good for something someday. And he kept adding to it, year after year. By the time Everett died in 2006, the tin held more money, not a lot, but more. And it also held some papers he'd slipped in over the last years, old deeds, an old tax receipt on the house, a little ledger where he'd noted his union payments, 2 gold double eagle coins he'd bought the one time he'd won a small county raffle and never told a soul about, and a sealed letter in an envelope that read, "Open if I go first." Everett died on a Tuesday in September. He'd been out watering the basil. He grabbed at his chest, sat down on the wellhead and told Ruth, who came running out from the kitchen, "Watch the well," and then he was gone. He didn't manage to say anything more, but he didn't need to. 3 days after the funeral, Ruth went down into the well for the first time in her life. She was 58. She and Everett had lived in that house 38 years. The tin had been hanging on that wire for 35 of them, and Ruth had never once climbed down. She borrowed a ladder from their neighbor Grady Sexton. She waited for dark, locked the gate with both locks, left Copper, a puppy back then, shut up in the kitchen. She climbed down into the well. It smelled damp, of mud, of cold stone. Ruth remembered 68, the water sounding like a bell far off, and her throat closed up so tight she had to stop halfway down the ladder and breathe. She reached the wire, found the tin. It was right where Everett had left it in 71, in fresh bags he'd put on it back in 99, the last time he'd cleaned the well out. She unhooked it, climbed up, set it on the kitchen table, and opened it. Everything was there, and so was the letter. "Ellie," the letter began, written in Everett's uneven hand on a sheet of graph paper. "If you're reading this, it's because I'm not around anymore. Don't go feeling too sad. Well, feel a little sad, but not too much. I loved you like nobody else ever is going to love you, and you know that. What's down that well is for you, not for the kids. For you, you hear me, Ellie? For you. The kids have their own lives now. Wendell earns his own keep. Loretta married a hard-working man. Bobby's up north and doing fine. You don't have anybody looking out for you, Ellie. Your pension's going to be short. This is so you don't have to fret over the gas bill, the electric, the doctor, whatever comes up. But I'm going to ask you one thing, Ellie. Don't tell the kids, not Wendell, not Loretta, not Bobby. Not even when you get old and your heart softens up, because you will soften up, Ellie. That's just how you are. But you hold on anyway. Even if it hurts. Even if they cry to you, you hold on, because if they find out, they'll ask and you'll give and you'll end up with nothing. And I don't want you left with nothing, Ellie. That's why I put it down the well. That's why I didn't put it in the bank. At the bank, the kids can ask for it. Down the well, nobody can ask you for a thing. Take care of yourself, Ellie. Watch that gas stove. Watch your heart. Watch out for the kids too, even though it hurts to read that. I love you, Everett. Ruth read the letter 3 times, then she put it back in the tin. She closed the tin again, wrapped it fresh in new bags, waited for full dark, climbed down into the well, hung the tin back on the wire, pushed it into the gap between the stones, climbed up, and closed the wellhead with the sheet metal cover Everett had put on back in the 90s to keep any animal from falling in. And she never told a soul, not Wendell, not Loretta, not Bobby, not Alma, not the preacher the week he came calling after the funeral, not Miss Tildy, who helped her with the wash on Sundays, not even Copper, who was just a puppy and didn't understand a thing, but was there all the same, not a soul. 18 years went by like that, 18. Year after year, Miss Ruthie, because by then everybody called her that, not Ruth, not Ellie, lived alone in the house on Laurel Street. She drew her pension, ran her errands, read her dictionary, watered her basil, went to church on Sundays, watched the little Christmas program the children put on outside the church every December, said hello, smiled, and every so often climbed down into the well. Not often, 2 or 3 times a year in the early morning hours, with the ladder she'd borrowed from Grady Sexton, until Grady passed away in 2014, and she bought a ladder of her own that she kept in the back room. She'd climb down, pull out the tin, add whatever she'd managed to save off her pension. Sometimes $10, sometimes $20, sometimes nothing, when there just hadn't been anything left over that month. She'd count what was there, put it back, climb up. That was all. She never spent the well money, only added to it. What for? She didn't know. Everett had said it was for her, but she didn't need it. The pension covered her. She spent little, ate little, dressed little. Once a year she'd buy herself a pair of shoes. Every couple of years a new shawl. The rest stayed down there. Sometimes when she climbed down she'd talk to it. She'd talk to the well low, the way a person talks to an old dog, the way a person talks to a wall that listens. She'd say little things. Here we are, old man, 15 years now, can you believe it? The kids hardly come around anymore. Copper's poorly in the hip. My side aches on the left. But I'm not telling the doctor, don't want to scare myself. She didn't tell it important things, she told it small things. The well never answered, but it was there. So why didn't she tell her children? Here's a thing that maybe won't sit easy, and I'm going to say it anyway, because it's what this story needs said. Miss Ruthie wasn't some innocent victim. Miss Ruthie knew exactly what she was doing. Miss Ruthie had read Everett's letter and had agreed with every word of it. Everett had written, "Watch out for the kids," too, even though it hurts to read that. And some part of her knew Everett had been right. She knew how Wendell was with money. Wendell ran a loan and pawn operation over in Pikeville. He charged 15% a month. He collected hard. One time, when Wendell was 22, he'd borrowed $3,000 off Everett for some business venture, and never once paid it back. Everett never asked for it. He just quit lending to him. She knew how Loretta was. Loretta had married Gary Whitfield, an accountant up in Lexington, who managed the books for 3 big retail stores and had a wandering hand with $1. Loretta lived well, 2 cars, a nice house, but every time she called her mother, she'd say, "Mum, we are just squeezed so tight right now, so many bills." That wasn't true. Miss Ruthie knew it. Loretta had been saying that since she was young. She said it out of habit. She knew how Bobby was. Bobby was the baby, the favorite, the one who'd gone off to Dayton at 21 and hardly ever came back, 3 times total. To Everett's funeral, to a cousin's wedding, and once midweek without warning, when he'd had a falling out with his wife and needed a place to be. Bobby sent his mother money every Christmas, not much, $40. And on the phone he'd say, "Mum, anything you need, anything at all, just say the word." And Miss Ruthie never did say the word, because she knew that if she said, "I need this," Bobby would think it over, mention it to his wife, and 2 months later, send half of it. She knew. Miss Ruthie knew exactly who her 3 children were, and she loved them. She loved them with the tired, old love of a mother who no longer expects anything, but she knew them, and that's why she'd never told them. And here's the hard part, the part that might not sit well. Miss Ruthie was also keeping that well money against them, not only for herself, against them too, in case someday they tried something. That day came. It came in September of 2024, 1 week before Wendell showed up with the broad power of attorney. Loretta called on a Sunday afternoon. They talked for half an hour or so about this and that, about the grandson starting middle school, about Gary changing jobs, about the weather up in Lexington. And at the end, like it was nothing at all, Loretta said, "Say, Mom, I've got a little question for you." "Tell me, sweetheart." "The house down in Neon, have you thought at all about what you're going to do with it?" "What do you mean, do with it, honey?" "Well, Mom, you're getting on, and that house is old, and it costs to keep up. And the three of us got to talking. We thought maybe it'd be good to get things squared away on paper just in case." Miss Ruthie went quiet. "The three of you?" "Yes, Mom. Wendell and Bobby and I talked here a while back. We thought it'd be good if you gave us a little power of attorney so we could handle house business if anything ever happened, if you ever needed to move in with one of us, if there was ever big repairs needed, so we could move on things without you having to worry over it. A little power of attorney. Yes, Mom, a little one. Wendell's going to bring it by next week. It's just a signature. It's for paperwork. It's nothing." Miss Ruthie sat quiet a while longer. "All right, sweetheart." "All right, Mom, thank you. I'll send you a kiss. Tell Copper hey." And they hung up. That night, Miss Ruthie climbed down into the well, not to take anything out, just to check, to see that the tin was still there, to touch the wire with her hand and make sure it was holding firm. To count. She counted. There was $48,600 in cash, in bills saved up between the 90s and 2024 in all denominations, plus Everett's 2 gold double eagle coins that she'd had appraised at a jewelry shop in Whitesburg back in 2019. Without saying where they'd come from, they were my aunt's, she'd told them, worth around $2,400 apiece, plus the little gold cross, which was 18 carat and worth around $600, plus the chain, plus a few more small pieces Everett had slipped in over the years, plus the letter, plus the old deed papers, plus a few more papers besides. All told, counting everything, it came to somewhere around $54,000. It wasn't a fortune, it wasn't enough to live on for 20 years, but it was hers. She put it back, hung the tin back up, climbed out, closed the wellhead cover, hosed off the ladder, put it away in the back room, washed her hands, washed her face, sat down at the kitchen table with a glass of sweet tea and stared at the ceiling. She knew what was coming. She knew. Wendell showed up on Tuesday, October the 22nd. He brought 2 papers. One was a limited power of attorney for handling her Social Security business. That one was real. That paper genuinely existed. That paper genuinely was legitimate. That paper genuinely was needed, because Miss Ruthie had run into a problem with Social Security the month before, and they'd asked for an authorized family member. That paper sat on top in the folder. The other paper sat underneath. The other paper was a broad, irrevocable power of attorney granting full authority to sell, mortgage, encumber, or transfer any and all real property belonging to the grantor. That paper was in the folder too, but it was underneath, and Wendell never showed it to her. Wendell just said, "Sign here, Mom," and covered half the words with his big hand, like it was nothing, the same as when he was a boy. And Miss Ruthie signed. She signed both, and why did she sign it knowing what it was? Here's the thing, here's the whole heart of the matter. Here's what this story is trying to say, even if it never raises its voice to say it. Miss Ruthie signed because she wanted to see just how far they'd go. She wanted to know for certain, wanted the full and complete proof, wanted there to be no doubt left at all. She had spent months, years, suspecting something like this was coming. Loretta's phone call had confirmed it, but she still needed the final proof. She needed Wendell to lay the paper right in front of her. She needed him to cover the words with his hand. She needed him to smile the way he used to smile as a boy asking to go down to the creek. She needed to see it happen. And she saw it. And she signed. She signed knowing. She signed with the blue ballpoint pen that was hers. She signed with the big round R and the long tail on the final H. She signed in full because after signing, and this only she knew, Wendell never knew it, nobody ever knew it. Miss Ruthie already had the answer to the question she'd been asking herself in silence in front of that well for 18 years. The answer was yes. Yes. Her children were capable of it, and if that was true, then everything else could go ahead too. Coffee's good, sweetheart. Let me warm you up a little more. No, it's fine like this. Thank you. Wendell stood up, kissed her on the forehead, gathered up the folder and left. His keys jingled at the gate. The truck pulled off. Miss Ruthie sat there. She looked at the yard, looked at the well, looked at her hands. The ink stain on her right index finger was still there. It was darker than it had been that morning. Maybe it was just the light. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. 11 days went by, 11 days in which Miss Ruthie did what she always did. Up at 6, water boiled, Copper's biscuit handed over, a page of the dictionary read. That week her words were settle, settled, setback, settlement, southbound, southwest. She went to the store, said hello to Alma, bought 2 sweet rolls, watered the basil, ate, watched the news and waited. She knew something was coming. She didn't know exactly what. She knew that signed paper was going to turn up somewhere, in some shape, in some piece of news. It turned up on Saturday, November the 2nd. But that part comes later, because Miss Ruthie had something else to wait on first. She had to wait for the moon to turn to its last quarter, the phase Everett had always said was right for cleaning out the well, because the water dropped and you could see the bottom better. And the last quarter fell on Thursday, November the 7th. 5 days off. It's worth telling what happened in those 5 days, even though it might not seem to matter, because those 5 days are what tell you who Miss Ruthie really was. And if they don't get told, what she did afterward won't make any sense. It'll get taken wrong. Folks will think she was just a bitter old woman out for revenge, calculating, and that wasn't it. Or it was that, but it was other things too. It was a lot of things all at once, same as everybody is. Monday, November the 4th. Miss Ruthie went to the store as always, bought her 2 sweet rolls. She said to Alma, "Say, how much do they charge around here for a small moving job?" "A moving job? What's that about, hun?" "Just curious. A niece of mine's looking into something like that. Well, there's that boy of Don Pete's with the red pickup. He charges about $40 for a short haul. Around here in town, less than that. Thank you, hun." Miss Ruthie took her rolls and went on. Alma stood there a minute wondering about it, but forgot soon enough because a woman came in wanting a dozen muffins, and she got busy with her. Miss Ruthie's little question got swallowed up by the morning. That's how it goes with questions in a small town. Sometimes the morning swallows them, sometimes it doesn't. Tuesday, November the 5th. Miss Ruthie made 2 phone calls. The first was to a real estate office over in Whitesburg. She asked whether they had any small houses for sale around Neon, 1 bedroom with a yard. They said yes. They offered her 3. She asked for the addresses. The second call was to a bank. She asked how to open a new account, whether her identification was current enough, whether she'd need proof of address. They told her what she'd need. Miss Ruthie wrote it all down in a yellow notebook that had once belonged to her old school. Then she hung up, gave Copper a biscuit, went out to the yard and looked at the well. "It's coming, old man," she told it. "It's coming." Wednesday, November the 6th. Miss Ruthie didn't leave the house, stayed in all day. She read. She sewed up a hem on her old shawl that had come loose along the edge. She sat in the green armchair with her sewing basket, threaded the needle, and spent a good quarter hour just measuring the hem with her fingers before she started stitching. The hem didn't matter. Nobody was going to look at her hem. But she sat there sewing and picking it out and sewing it again because her hands needed something to do and her head needed her hands to be doing it. At 5 that afternoon, the phone rang. It was Bobby. "Mom, how are you?" "Fine, sweetheart, and you?" "Fine, Mom. Say, has Wendell called you at all?" "Wendell came by last week, sweetheart, I know, but he hasn't said anything to you about it." "About what, sweetheart?" "Never mind, Mom. Forget I said anything. I'll call him later." And he hung up. Miss Ruthie stood there with the phone in her hand. Copper watched her from the rug with cloudy old eyes. "It's coming, Copper. It's coming." Thursday, November the 7th, last quarter moon. At 9 that night, Miss Ruthie locked the gate with both locks, drew the curtains, turned off the lamp in the front room, left only 1 light burning in the kitchen, the yellow bulb that gave off just enough to see by. She put a sweater on over her dress, took the ladder out of the back room, carried it out to the yard, set it against the wellhead, took a hand lantern and an empty cloth sack. Copper followed her out to the yard, lay down by the sycamore, and watched her climb down. Miss Ruthie went down slow, rung by rung, bracing against the stone with her left hand, holding the lantern in her right. The well smelled the same as always, damp, mud, cold stone, with a far-off trace of moss. She reached the wire, found the tin, unhooked it, put it in the cloth sack, climbed up, reached the top, sat down on the wellhead to catch her breath. Her heart was racing. 76 wasn't 75 or 74. 76 was something else altogether. She carried the sack into the kitchen, set the tin on the table, opened it. Everything was there like always. But that night, Miss Ruthie did something she had never done before. She took out the money, laid it in stacks, counted it 3 times. $48,600 in cash, the 2 coins, the cross, the chain, 3 old rings, a small gold bracelet that had been her own mother's, that Everett had slipped in back in '95 without ever saying why. The old deeds, the union papers, Everett's ledger, and the letter. The letter. Miss Ruthie picked up the letter and read it for the 4th time in her life. The other 3 times had been the first in 2006, 3 days after the funeral. The second in 2014, when Grady Sexton died and death was on her mind. The third in 2019, when the canary died and she went quiet for 3 days. This was the 4th. Watch out for the kids too, even though it hurts to read that. Miss Ruthie folded the letter, put it back in its envelope, set it aside. Then she took 3 new, empty envelopes. Plain white ones, the kind nobody writes real letters on anymore. She'd bought them at the office supply store on the square that Tuesday, along with a new pen she never ended up using, because in the end, she reached for her same old blue ballpoint. She took the pen and wrote Bobby on the first envelope, and she wrote Loretta on the second, and Wendell on the third. She set them on the table, one beside the other, in the order they'd been born, oldest to youngest, left to right, like 3 students lined up in a row. She looked at them a long while, then set the pen down on Wendell's envelope and just sat there looking. It was 3 in the morning on Friday, November the 8th. The suitcase was already packed. It sat upstairs in the bedroom next to the bed, with 2 dresses, 3 changes of underclothes, the old shawl with its mended hem, the red dictionary open to S, and a photograph of Everett Young, sleeves rolled up, standing beside the well the September it was finished, back in '68. The money was counted, the envelopes were addressed, all 3 still empty. Miss Ruthie lifted the pen, lifted it slow, her hand stained blue-violet at the index finger, darker now than ever, because she'd just finished writing 3 names in fresh ink, and she sat there like that with the pen in the air, not knowing, not deciding, not moving. Here's where I have to ask you all for something again, because what comes next is the strongest part of this whole story, because what Miss Ruthie is about to put in each of those envelopes, and who's going to get more, and who's going to get less, and who's going to get nothing at all, that's what decides whether this story ends in forgiveness, or in punishment, or in silence. And she hadn't decided any of that yet, not at 3 in the morning on the 8th of November, with her hand raised and her heart squeezed tight and the suitcase packed upstairs. She hadn't decided. If you've stuck with this story all the way to here, go ahead and subscribe to the channel right now if you haven't already, because part 2 brings the ending and you won't want to miss it. Leave me a like if this story has got you in the pit of your stomach, the way it grabs the rest of us who listen to stories like this. And down in the comments, tell me one thing. Just one, something you've kept to yourself for years without telling a living soul. Something that's yours alone. No name if you don't want to give one. No details if you'd rather not. Just tell me it exists. Because Miss Ruthie wasn't the only one who keeps things. Miss Ruthie was one of a great many. And that well of hers, most all of us have got one, even if it isn't a well at all. Even if it's a drawer, a closet, a notebook, a gap between 2 loose bricks out in the yard. Tell me about it. 3 in the morning. Friday, November the 8th, the pen in the air. Miss Ruthie breathed deep, not all at once, slow, the way a person breathes before putting their hands into very cold water. Copper snored soft on the kitchen rug, his nose pressed against the leg of the stove. Outside there was no wind, no sound at all. Neon at night is a town that goes completely quiet. Not like Pikeville, not like Lexington, not like anywhere there's traffic running through. In neon at night, the well is the loudest thing there is. She set the pen down. She laid it on the table beside the 3 envelopes without writing a thing yet. And she sat there thinking. Now I have to tell you what went through Miss Ruthie's head over the next 2 hours. And I say what went through her head, not what she decided, because what she decided comes after. First, a great deal went through her head. That's what we're going to hear now. She thought of Wendell, newborn at the hospital up in Jenkins in '69. Everett crying in the corner of the room because it was a boy and he was healthy. Wendell fat and pink, with a stiff little shock of black hair standing straight up on his crown. She held him, pressed him to her chest, nursed him. Everett sat down on the edge of the bed and told her, "Ellie, that's it, there's 3 of us now, we can't die alone anymore." And they both laughed. She thought of Wendell at 7, the neon elementary school, the blue uniform she pressed every Sunday night, the book satchel, the notebooks covered in brown paper, the chocolate milk mustache from the treat she'd buy him at the store, his fingernails always dirty from dirt because there was no keeping that boy out of the woods. She thought of Wendell at 14, the first time he fought with Everett over a bicycle he wanted that Everett told him he wasn't going to buy because he hadn't earned it. Wendell hollered, "Nobody ever gives me anything," and slammed out the door. He didn't come back for 3 days. They found him over at an uncle's place in Jenkins, sleeping in the back room. Everett went and got him, didn't say a word, brought him home, but something broke between the 2 of them that week, and it never fully mended. She thought of Wendell at 22, asking Everett for the $3,000, the look on his face walking into the kitchen. That same boyhood smile, head tilted a little to the left, the very same one from Tuesday, October the 22nd, 2024. The same smile, exactly the same. Miss Ruthie closed her eyes. She thought too of Loretta. Loretta as a little girl had been a sweet child, straight-haired, big eyes the color of light honey. She'd sung in the church choir since she was 5. Miss Eula Hatfield, the very same Miss Hatfield from the normal school in Richmond, who'd later come to settle in Neon and become Miss Ruthie's friend, used to tell her, "That girl of yours has got the voice of an angel. Take her round to the competitions." And she did. And Loretta won twice, a medal in '79 over in Pikeville, a certificate in '81 down in Richmond. She thought of Loretta at 18, telling her she was going off to study in Lexington. Everett was against it. "Not up there, Loretta. Too many people up there, you'll get lost." Miss Ruthie stayed quiet at first, but then told Everett, "Let her go, old man, let her go. If she doesn't go, she'll end up bitter, and she'll blame us for it the rest of her life." And Everett, grumbling, gave in. Loretta went, and 2 years later met Gary, and 3 years later married him, and by 5 years later she wasn't coming home except at Christmas. She thought of Loretta when she called to say she was expecting, "Mom, we're going to have a baby." And Miss Ruthie stood in the kitchen and cried alone, the phone back on the hook, because she was a grandmother now, and that's a thing you don't understand until it happens to you. She thought of Loretta the day of Everett's funeral. She'd come in late with Gary and the boy, who was 5 then. She'd cried at the graveside, hugged her mother, said, "Mom, come live with us. Don't stay in this house alone." And Miss Ruthie told her, "No, sweetheart, this is where your daddy is, this is where I'm staying." And Loretta had nodded and hadn't pushed it much. 3 days later, she was back in Lexington. She thought of Loretta on Sunday, October the 27th, 2024, on the phone. A little power of attorney, Mum, just paperwork. Loretta's voice, that same sweet voice, the voice from the church choir, the voice of the '79 medal. Hearing it, Miss Ruthie clenched her hands and thought of Bobby. Bobby was born in '77. He was the baby, the favorite. Everett carried him up on his shoulders till he turned 8, called him my little buddy. And Bobby called him Daddy, no Papa, and climbed up on him the minute he got home from work, hunting after the peppermints Everett always kept in his shirt pocket. Bobby was the wildest of the 3. Climbed trees, threw himself into the creek down at Troublesome, got into it with the neighbor kids. One time he fell off the roof and broke his arm. Another time he snuck a drink of Everett's hidden moonshine and threw up for 3 days straight. But Bobby was also the most affectionate, the one who hugged the most, the one who remembered birthdays, the one who bought his mother flowers on Mother's Day every single year without a soul ever telling him to. Right up until he was 21. At 21, Bobby went up to Dayton. A cousin took him, told him, "There's work up there, cousin. You can make something of yourself up there." And Bobby went, and he stayed. And he met Donna at a little church in Dayton, and married Donna and had 2 kids with Donna and never came back for good. The calls got further apart. Every week at first, then every couple weeks, then once a month, then whenever he remembered. The love stayed, but it went cold like coffee nobody drinks anymore. Miss Ruthie thought about Bobby's call the Wednesday before. Hasn't said anything to you about it. That question of Bobby's. Bobby knew he knew what was coming, and he'd tried to warn his mother without warning her. He'd called to feel her out, to see if she already knew, to clear his own conscience ahead of time. Bobby had called to clear his conscience. Miss Ruthie opened her eyes. 3:30 in the morning. Copper stirred on the rug, lifted his head, looked at her, settled back down. Miss Ruthie picked the pen back up, uncapped it, tested the ink on the corner of an old newspaper lying on the table, fresh blue-violet ink. It came out clean. She took the first envelope, Bobby's, opened it, and began. Into Bobby's envelope she put $8,000 cash, the little gold cross, and a handwritten page that read, "My son Bobby, your father left this with me when he died and I kept it. I'm giving it to you because you called on Wednesday. You didn't say anything about the paper, but you called. That counts, that matters. The cross belonged to a buddy of your father's who died back in '70. His name was Charlie Mullins. He worked the railroad, same as your daddy. The cross is 18-karat gold, appraised at $600 at a jewelry shop in Whitesburg back in 2019. Do whatever you want with it. Spend the money on whatever you need. Don't tell me on what. I'm not asking. I don't want to know. I love you. Your Mum." She sealed the envelope, set it aside. Into Loretta's envelope she put $3,000 cash and a page. "My daughter Loretta, I'm leaving you this because you're my daughter, and because when you were little you sang like an angel, and I've never forgotten that. It isn't much, I know. You and Gary do just fine and you don't need it, but I'm leaving it. So you know I thought of you. That I remembered. The call you made me on October the 27th was the one that warned me. You warned me without meaning to. You told me the 3 of them, and I understood. It wasn't only Wendell, it was all 3 of you, you too. But I love you. That doesn't go away, even if it hurts. Your Mum." She sealed the envelope, set it aside, took the 3rd envelope. Wendell's opened it and sat there looking at it empty. Here I have to stop, because this next part matters, and I'm not sure you're going to like what I have to tell you. Miss Ruthie sat a full half hour with Wendell's envelope open in front of her and her hand resting on the table beside it. A half hour. The yellow light off the kitchen bulb fell slanted across her face. Copper snored. The wall clock read 4:05, then 4, then 4:05 again. She thought of Wendell newborn all over again, of the chocolate milk at the store, of the door slamming at 14, of the $3,000, of that smile with the head tilted just so. She thought of something Everett had told her once, back around 95, talking about Wendell. "Ellie, that boy of ours isn't bad, he's greedy." Now that's not the same thing. A bad man hurts other folks for no reason at all. A greedy man hurts other folks because he needs to. Wendell always needs, and it's never going to be enough for him. She thought about that, and then she thought of something she'd forgotten for years, that came back to her whole and sudden that early morning. One afternoon back in 1985, she'd been sitting at the dining table grading workbooks with her blue pen. Wendell was 15. He came in from the yard and said, "Mum, do you love me?" "Of course I love you, sweetheart. What kind of question is that?" "More than Norma, more than Bobby. I love all 3 of you the same, sweetheart." "That's not true, Mum. You love Bobby more." "That's not true, Wendell." "Yes, it is, Mom, and you love Loretta more than me, too. I'm the one stuck in the middle when it comes to love. The middle one. I know it already, but it's all right, I get by." And he'd gone back out to the yard. Miss Ruthie had sat there with her grading half finished. She never went back to that conversation. She never once spoke to Wendell about it again, not once in her whole life. Everett had come home that night, and she hadn't told him either. But now, at 4:10 in the morning on November the 8th, 2024, 39 years later, Miss Ruthie remembered, and she cried a little. Slow, without a sound, so as not to wake Copper. Then she wiped her eyes with her sweater sleeve and started filling Wendell's envelope. She put in $28,000 cash, Everett's 2 gold double eagle coins, Charlie Mullins's thin gold chain, her own mother's little gold bracelet, and the 3 old rings. It was by far the biggest of the 3 envelopes, and she wrote a page too. Wendell, I'm leaving you more because you need more. Your father was right about you. He wrote it once in a letter, and I understood it. He said you were greedy, not bad, and a greedy man never has enough. I know it, I know you. I'm leaving you more for a reason that isn't love, son. It's something else. You made me sign that paper on October the 22nd. You covered the words with your hand. You smiled the way you did when you were 7 years old. I signed knowing. I signed because I wanted to see if you were capable of it. And you were capable, son. You were. But I'm capable too. I'm capable of never saying a word about this to a soul, of not turning you in, of not shaming you in front of your wife or your boy, of keeping quiet. I'm keeping quiet. I'm leaving you more because I know you're going to need it, because you're always going to need it, because it's never going to be enough. And I don't want you 5 years from now, once I'm not here anymore, going and borrowing from somebody who charges you 15% a month, same as you charge other folks. I don't want that for you, son. This is the last thing I'm ever giving you. After this, don't ask me for anything else. Don't come looking for me. Don't bring up the house on Laurel Street. Don't ask me where any of this came from. That house isn't mine anymore, and I don't belong to anybody anymore. I live where I'm going to live, and that's where I'll die when it's my time. I love you, son, in spite of everything, even if you don't believe it. I love you. Your mom. She sealed the envelope, set it beside the other 2. At 4:30, Copper got up, walked slow to the yard door, scratched at it with his paw. Miss Ruthie got up and let him out. The dog went out, sniffed the sycamore, sniffed the basil, sniffed the wellhead, did his business in the corner of the yard where he always did, and settled back down on the rug. Miss Ruthie sat down, looked at the 3 envelopes, and took out one more sheet of paper, a sheet for nobody, a sheet for herself, a sheet where she wrote in her teacher's hand, the big round R and the long-tailed final H, one single line. I did it, and it's done. She signed it, folded it in 4, tucked it into her sweater pocket. There was still money left in the tin. $9,600 remained, along with the old deeds, the union papers, Everett's ledger, and the letter. She packed it all into an old backpack from the days she used to take the school children on field trips. The backpack had a frayed eagle patch on the back. She zipped it shut, set it beside the suitcase. Then she took the 3 envelopes, put them in a cloth bag, slung it over her shoulder, switched off the yellow kitchen light, and carried the suitcase and the backpack out to the gate. Copper followed her. Come on, old man. You too. And she clipped on his leash. Copper wagged his tail slow, like he understood, or like he didn't understand at all, but was coming along regardless. They went out onto Laurel Street. It was 5:15 in the morning. Friday, November the 8th, 2024. Neon was dark. The Free Will Baptist Church stood outlined against the back of the square like a great shadow with a cross on top. The alley behind the feed store smelled of dust and wet dog. Somewhere off toward Troublesome Creek a whippoorwill called once, then went quiet. Miss Ruthie walked 3 blocks to a small house around the corner from the church, Sycamore Street, number 14. The house was 1 room, a front room, a kitchen, a bathroom out back. It had a little 5-foot yard with a lemon tree in a pot. She'd seen it Tuesday with the real estate office. She'd put a hold on it Wednesday with a cash deposit of $3,000. It was hers now. She took the key from her pocket, unlocked the gate, went in, switched on the light. The little house smelled of fresh paint. The previous owner had rented it out 3 years back to a young couple who'd moved on up north. It was clean, it was ready. She set the suitcase in the bedroom, put the backpack under the bed, laid Copper down on an old blanket she'd brought, set out a bowl of water for him, and sat down in the only chair the house had, a wooden chair with a woven bottom that had been pushed into a corner. She breathed. That chair was hers, that house, that air hers. At 6, the sun came up. Light came through the window with no curtain on it yet. Miss Ruthie was still in the chair. She hadn't slept. She wasn't sleepy. Copper snored beside her. She got up, walked out to the little yard, looked at the lemon tree. It had 2 lemons still hanging, still green. "We're going to be all right, old man," she said, not sure if she was talking to Copper, or the lemon tree, or the memory of Everett. "We're going to be all right." She went back inside, took the red dictionary out of the suitcase, set it on a makeshift shelf, a wooden crate turned on its side, opened it to S. "Southwesterly," she read out loud. "Coming from the southwest as wind or weather." She closed the dictionary. She poured herself a glass of water from the jug she'd carried full from the house on Laurel Street. She drank it slow, then went out, locked the gate, walked 3 blocks back, but not to the house on Laurel Street. She walked to the Free Will Baptist Church. The church opened at 7 for the early service, so it was already unlocked. Inside sat 3 old women and 1 old man. Preacher Tackett was up front tending to things at the altar rail. Miss Ruthie sat down on a back pew. She didn't pray, didn't bow her head, just sat there. At 7:10 she took the 3 envelopes out of the cloth bag, set them on the pew beside her, sat looking at them, and at 7 on the dot when the service began she got up. She left the envelopes on the pew. No, that isn't what she did. Let me correct myself here. Storyteller that I am, because I got ahead of things. Miss Ruthie thought about leaving them there. She thought about it. She came within a second of doing it. It struck her as a fine thing, her 3 children coming into town to collect them, each on their own, not knowing about the others, finding out right there in the church on the back pew, with Preacher Tackett handing them over. But then she thought, no, not because it wasn't a fine thing, but because it was theatre. And Miss Ruthie was not theatre. She picked the envelopes back up, put them in the cloth bag, got up, left the church, walked to the neon post office, which opened at 8. She waited outside on a bench till 8. When they opened, she sent all 3 envelopes certified mail, each to its own address. Wendell to Pikeville, Loretta to Lexington, Bobby to Dayton. She paid. They gave her 3 receipts. She tucked them away and went to get breakfast. She had breakfast at Verney's Diner on the square, next door to Sloane's Bakery. She ordered eggs and gravy and a glass of sweet tea. Miss Verney served her, asked her, "How's Miss Ruthie doing? You settled, hun?" Settled. Miss Verney didn't ask anything more. Miss Ruthie ate slow, sopped her biscuit in the egg yolk, drank 2 glasses of sweet tea, paid, thanked Miss Verney, went out, and walked over to Sloane's Bakery. Alma was arranging sweet rolls in the display case. "Well, hey there. Up early this morning. Alma, I need to tell you something." I moved. Alma stood there with a roll still in her hand. "What?" "I moved over to Sycamore Street, number 14, right around the corner from the church, little house with a lemon tree." "But hon, what about the house on Laurel Street? That one's done, it's sold, and the kids, I'll tell you about that later. Did something happen to you?" "No, hon, nothing happened. I'm fine, I'm settled. Just moved, that's all." Alma looked at her a good long while. Then she did something she'd never once done in 40 years of friendship. She came around the counter, walked out of the bakery, and hugged Miss Ruthie tight, without a word. For a while, Miss Ruthie didn't cry. Alma did, a little quiet. Then they let go. "Hon, you need anything? I need 2 sweet rolls." Alma smiled with wet eyes, wrapped up the rolls, handed them over. "This one's on the house today, hun. Today and always, hon. I'm paying." Miss Ruthie set the coins on the counter. Alma didn't pick them up. She walked out with her rolls, walked back to Sycamore Street, sat down in the woven chair, ate one of the rolls, tore up the other for copper, and finally fell asleep, sitting up, her head against the wall, until 11 that morning. Here I have to stop again, because there's something I need to tell you that isn't part of the plot exactly, and yet it is part of the story all the same. Storyteller that I am, I believe most women of Miss Ruthie's generation knew this without ever saying it out loud, that a day comes when your children turn into people, people with interests of their own, people with their eye on what you've got, people who aren't yours anymore the way they were when they were small and climbing up into your lap. That happens. It happens to nearly all of them, and most of them just bear it. Most don't do what Miss Ruthie did. Most cry quiet and sign whatever's put in front of them, and go live with one of the kids and die in a spare bedroom full of somebody else's things. That's the ordinary way of it. What Miss Ruthie did wasn't ordinary, but it wasn't revenge either. I want that to be clear. It wasn't revenge, it was something else. It was a way of loving all three of them in her own fashion, dividing things up unevenly, giving more to the one who needed more, giving less to the one who already had plenty, giving something different to the one who'd called her in secret. It was a way of telling them, I know all three of you, I know you well, I know you better than you know me. It was a way of having the last word without ever raising her voice. Miss Ruthie never once raised her voice in her whole life, not through Wendell's birth, not through the slammed door at 14, not through Everett's funeral. But that early morning, Miss Ruthie spoke louder than she ever had in her life, and nobody heard her say a word. Nobody but the 3 envelopes and the folded page tucked away in her sweater pocket. At 11, Miss Ruthie woke up, got up, walked to the little kitchen, poured herself water, splashed her face, combed her hair back with her fingers, and set about building her new life. She built it slow, she took her time. She bought a second-hand table at the flea market that Monday, bought a couple more chairs, bought a used iron bed frame that got delivered the following Wednesday, bought a new mattress, that much she wasn't going to skimp on, not at her age, not somebody else's old mattress, bought dishes at the general store on the square, sewed her own curtains over the course of a week, one out of yellow cloth from an old tablecloth, another out of flowered fabric Alma gave her, bought a clay pot for the basil, grown from a cutting she'd brought from the old house, bought a little battery radio. She lived, and while she waited for the answers to come, the first answer arrived on Tuesday, November the 12th. Bobby came in person, in a rental car out of a lot across the state line. He drove down through the mountains. He got to Neon at 4 in the afternoon. He knocked at the little house on Sycamore Street, number 14. Copper barked. Miss Ruthie opened the door. Bobby's eyes were red, and he had an envelope in his hand. Mom, son. Mom, I didn't know. I swear to you I didn't know about the power of attorney. I only found out after, once it was already signed. Wendell called me, told me. It's done. It's signed. The house is sold. And I asked him, what do you mean the house is sold? And he told me, Mom, she already knew, she signed it. And I believed him, Mom, I believed him right up until this came. He held up the envelope. It was Bobby's envelope, still sealed, his name on it in blue-violet ink. I haven't opened it, Mom. I drove all the way down here without opening it because I wanted to see your face first, to know if it was true. It's true, son. True what, Mom? What it says in that envelope. But, Mom, I don't know what's in the envelope. Open it here. Bobby opened it. He took out the money, took out the medal, took out the page, read it again. He covered his face with both hands, cried, sitting in the woven chair his mother had pulled up for him. Mom, Mom, Mom. Miss Ruthie didn't go to him, stood there in the kitchen doorway. You called Wednesday, son, you called, that counts. Mom, I don't know what to do with this. Whatever you want, it's yours now. But, Mom, this is family money. It's yours, son. Your father wanted it to be mine. I want it to be yours all. Split up the way I split it. No arguing, no lawyers, no fighting over it. Everybody gets what's theirs, and that's the end of it. Bobby cried a while longer, then settled down. Then he took his mother's hand, kissed it, squeezed it. Mom, come with me to Dayton. Donna says it's fine. We've got the room. We've got whatever you need. No, son. Mom, please. No, son. Why not? Miss Ruthie looked at him a long moment. She smiled at him slow, the way you smile at a grown son who's still your baby all the same. Because I've got my own house now, son. This is my house, and this is where I'm staying. Bobby understood. Not all at once. It took a long, slow breath. But he understood. The way people understand when they're fighting against understanding. He nodded. Can I come see you? Whenever you want, son. Just call ahead. And the others will do whatever they do. You're not going to turn them in. No, son, I'm not turning anybody in. I just moved, that's all. Bobby hugged her. Miss Ruthie let herself be hugged. Not long, a short while, but it was real. Then he left. He left her a new phone, a simple prepaid cell. He told her, Mom, anything at all, just press one, my number's already saved. Miss Ruthie nodded. When he'd gone, she sat in the chair and looked at the phone lying on the table. She put it away in a drawer and sat looking at the lemon tree through the window. The second answer came Friday the 15th. It was Loretta, by phone. She didn't come in person. She called the old line at the house on Laurel Street, and the new owner, who'd already moved in, gave her the number for the new house that Miss Ruthie had left in case anything important came up. Loretta called. "Mum." "Loretta." "Mum, I got the envelope. It's fine." "Mum, are you angry with me?" "I'm not angry, sweetheart." "Mum, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Wendell told me it was for paperwork. I didn't know it was to sell it." "Sweetheart, you called me on the 27th. You told me, all three of you. You knew." "Mum, it wasn't like that. It wasn't exactly like that." "It was." Miss Ruthie waited. Loretta went quiet. "Mom, I'm sorry." "That's all right, sweetheart." "Do you forgive me?" Miss Ruthie breathed. "I love you, sweetheart. But forgiving is a different thing. Forgiving takes time. I can't tell you right now. Mom, I left you $3,000 in the envelope. That's what I can leave you right now. And my love, that isn't counted in dollars. Mom, I'll come see you whenever you want, sweetheart. But call ahead. The house is small." Loretta cried quiet on the other end of the line. Miss Ruthie waited for it to pass. "Mom, you sold the house. It's just, the buyer told me. I didn't sell it, sweetheart. You all sold it with that power of attorney." "Don't pretend you don't know that." Loretta went quiet again. "Bye, sweetheart. Bye, Mom." Miss Ruthie hung up. She stood there a moment with her hand on the phone, then got up, went out to the little yard, watered the basil with the green plastic can Alma had given her, and looked at the lemon tree. One of the lemons was turning yellow, nearly ripe. "We're going to be all right, old man," she said again, not sure who she was talking to. The third answer never came. Wendell didn't call. Wendell didn't write. Wendell didn't show up. 2 weeks passed, 3 passed, December came, the church Christmas program came on the 8th, which Miss Ruthie watched from her own doorway on Sycamore Street, not going close, not mixing in with the crowd, just watching the candles and the shawls from a distance, hearing the carols drift down the street and the church bell ring. Christmas came. Bobby called on the 24th, sent word from Donna. The grandkids sent their love in English. Miss Ruthie listened quiet and said, "Thank you, son, thank you." Loretta called on the 25th. Short. "Mom, Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." And they hung up. Wendell didn't call. Wendell never called. Not the 24th, not the 25th, not New Year's Eve, not New Year's Day, not Valentine's Day, not Mother's Day, not Miss Ruthie's birthday, August the 19th, 2025. No. Wendell received the envelope. Miss Ruthie knew it from the certified mail receipt. Wendell opened it. Wendell counted the money, he counted the coins, he counted the chain, counted the rings. Wendell read the page. And Wendell never called Miss Ruthie. This didn't surprise her. It hurt, yes, but it didn't surprise her. Wendell in that letter had read exactly what his mother knew about him. Greedy, not bad, never going to have enough. Don't ask me for anything else. Don't come looking for me. Wendell had understood it. And Wendell, greedy as he was, wasn't a fool. And he'd understood one more thing besides, that the cord was cut. If she told him don't come, he wouldn't come. If she told him don't ask me, he wouldn't ask. It was almost like a deal. Miss Ruthie had written the deal on that page in the envelope. Wendell had signed it by never calling. And the two of them held up their end, each in their own way, for the rest of her life. That's how it went. One more thing happened too, and I'll tell you about it, because it's strange enough and because the story isn't whole without it. In February of 2025, Miss Ruthie was sitting on a bench on the courthouse square in Whitesburg one afternoon. She was eating a peppermint stick she'd bought off a little girl selling candy who'd wandered by. The girl looked about 10, wore a flowered dress, braids, pink plastic sandals. She said, "25 cents, Mom." Miss Ruthie gave her $1 and told her, "Keep the change, sweetheart." The girl smiled at her, sat down beside her a minute, asked if she had any grandbabies. Miss Ruthie told her yes, 3, 2 up in Ohio and 1 in Lexington. The girl said her uncle lived in Ohio too. Miss Ruthie said, "Well, isn't that something?" The girl got up and left, never turned up again in this story. But afterward, still sitting on the bench, Miss Ruthie watched an elderly man come walking up. Hat, cane, old worn dungarees, a plaid shirt. He sat down at the other end of the bench, leaving a polite gap between them. "Afternoon, ma'am." Afternoon, sir. Are you from around here, ma'am? Been here my whole life, and you're from over Jenkins way. Came in to see the doctor. I'm an old man now. Miss Ruthie smiled. I'm an old woman myself. The man laughed. He had false teeth, but a good laugh. He told her his name was Arlie Justice, that he was 84, that his father had marched with the Union men in the Battle of Blair Mountain back in 21. Miss Ruthie looked at him surprised. Blair Mountain, the miners' uprising. That very one, ma'am. I used to teach that in the schoolhouse. I'd tell the children about it, about the march right through this country here back in 1921, against the coal operators and their gun thugs, how a great many folks from around here joined up for a couple of weeks, and then the federal troops came in and put a stop to it, because the company men had asked Washington for help. Arlie Justice nodded. My daddy used to tell my grandfather that the men used to say, it isn't against the government, it's against the company. Meaning, it wasn't against the country, it wasn't against the flag, it was against the men who owned the mines, against the ones running things from up top. That was it. But they lost. They lost. Yes. They sat quiet a while. Then Arlie Justice said, the things a person loses and the things a person gains, ma'am, in the end, they come out to about the same thing, wearing two different names. My daddy used to tell me that, and I never understood it till just lately. Miss Ruthie glanced over at him. What happened just lately, sir? Lost my wife. I'm sorry, sir. No, don't be sorry. 52 years we had. She had a good death. I sat with her right to the end. That's just how it goes. What I'm saying is, I lost. Yes, but I gained too, because here I am in this square with a stranger lady sitting in the sun, telling her things. If my wife was still here, I wouldn't be here. I'd be home with her. I understand. That's why I say it. The same thing wearing two different names. Miss Ruthie nodded. Arlie Justice got up, tipped his hat, walked off slow, leaning on his cane, back toward the courthouse. Miss Ruthie sat there another hour, not thinking anything in particular, the peppermint stick between her blue-violet-stained fingers. Then she went home. That night, before bed, she wrote in a yellow notebook, the same one where she'd written down the bank details back in 2024, one single line. Arlie Justice is right. And she signed it, even though there was nobody to hand the signature to. March went by, April went by, May went by, the first Easter without her children, the first Mother's Day without a call from Wendell, though there was a call from Bobby, and a bouquet of gladiolus that Loretta sent up from Lexington by delivery service. Miss Ruthie lived well, lived on 4 more years, right up to November of 2028, but she lived settled. Copper died in July of 2026. She buried him in the little yard next to the lemon tree, made him a wooden cross out of 2 sticks tied with twine. She cried 3 days with the old shawl over her head. After that, she didn't cry anymore. She bought a new yellow canary and named him Butterscotch, after the little girl who'd sold her the peppermint stick that afternoon in February. She asked Bobby to come twice. Bobby came the first time in 2026, a whole week. The second time in 2028, when her heart was already failing, he brought her tamarind candy and some second-hand books he'd bought at a used bookstore across the state line. Loretta called every couple weeks, short, warm, distant. Miss Ruthie always answered. She'd ask after the grandson, tell her, give him my love, sweetheart. They never did see each other again. Loretta never came back to Neon after that call on November the 15th, 2024. Wendell never called. Miss Ruthie never asked after him. Nobody mentioned him to her. Alma never brought him up. Preacher Tackett never brought him up. Bobby mentioned him once, and Miss Ruthie changed the subject, and Bobby understood. Wendell, for his part, went on living in Pikeville. He kept on lending money, kept on charging his 15%. Things went middling for him. He had 2 bad financial scrapes over those 4 years. In neither one did he ask his mother, in neither one did he go see her. But the 2 gold double-eagle coins Miss Ruthie had sent him in that envelope, he kept those locked in a safe he had at the house in Pikeville. He never sold them, never pawned them, never spent them. And that, listeners, is about as close as a greedy man ever gets to forgiveness. But that part Miss Ruthie never knew because nobody ever told her, and because Wendell, true to the bargain, never sent word of it. Miss Ruthie died on Monday, November the 13th, 2028, at 3 in the afternoon. She died of a heart attack, same as Everett, like the heart had always been the two of them together, and hers had just taken 22 years longer to follow his. She was out in the little yard. She was watering the basil with Alma's green watering can, wetting the ground slow with hands stained blue-violet. The last workbook page she'd ever corrected had been 3 days before, helping a neighbor child with his fractions homework, and the sun fell slanted across her face from the west. Copper was long gone. Butterscotch sang in his cage in the kitchen. The lemon tree had ripe lemons on it. Miss Ruthie straightened up, felt a cold tightness in her chest, sat down on the yard step and stayed there, still looking out. Her neighbor found her an hour later, coming over with a plate of leftover cake from her grandson's birthday party. Miss Ruthie was sitting on the step with the green watering can beside her, still holding a little water, her hands stained blue-violet, both of them, the old shawl over her shoulders, her face at peace, her eyes closed. Now it falls to me, the storyteller, to tell the last of it. Miss Ruthie had left instructions. In a sealed letter she'd given Alma back in 2026, with strict word not to open it till she was gone. The letter said simple things. Bury her next to Everett. Give the canary butterscotch to the neighbor girl. Let Bobby keep the little house on Sycamore Street. Whatever was left of her pension and her savings, split it half to Loretta and half to a little one-room schoolhouse 2 counties over. The county school board would know which one. She left Wendell nothing. But at the end of the letter, in a postscript written in a hand already gone shaky, it said, Alma Hon, if Wendell comes to the funeral, give him the other letter, the one in the brown envelope in the linen drawer. If he doesn't come, burn it. Don't you open it, Hon. Please don't. And don't ask me what was in it. That isn't anybody's business anymore. Wendell didn't come to the funeral. Alma burned the brown envelope out behind the bakery, unopened, a week after the last of the visitation was done. Whatever that letter said, whatever Miss Ruthie meant to tell Wendell after she was gone, went up with the smoke. It went, and nobody ever knew. I like to imagine it said, forgive me, but maybe it said something else. Maybe it said, I loved you, son, even if you don't believe it. Maybe it said, take care of yourself, son. Maybe it said, Everett forgave you before I did, and I forgave you too. Even though it took me a while. Maybe it was just one line, I love you, your mom. Or maybe it was something harder, colder, truer than any of that. We don't know. We're never going to know. And that in the end is what this story is trying to say, that there are things that stay down in the well, things that never come up, things that get burned out behind a bakery in a little Kentucky town on an ordinary morning in November of 2028, with Alma standing there next to the ashes, not knowing what she'd burned but honoring what she'd been asked to do. That's all there is. Ruth Ellen Caldwell Combs rests in the town cemetery in Neon, row 13, plot 22, beside her husband Everett Combs. The headstone is plain. It reads, Ruth Ellen Combs, 1948-2028. Teacher, mother, settled. That word she asked for herself, in the letter to Alma. Settled, not beloved, not remembered, not everlasting. Settled, the same word she always gave when folks asked how she was doing. Settled. That's where the story ends. If you made it this far, thank you. Truly thank you. I know it runs long, I know it has moments that ache, mine in the telling of it, yours in the hearing of it. Stories about mothers and children are never easy, because they reach every one of us somewhere, those of us who are somebody's child, those of us who are somebody's mother, those of us who aren't either anymore. If this story stayed with you, leave me a comment down below, but don't tell me whether you liked it or not. That part doesn't matter to me, if I'm honest. What matters to me is something else. Tell me one thing you've kept to yourself for years without telling a living soul. Just one thing. No names if you'd rather not give one. No details if you'd rather not share them. Just tell me that thing exists. That you've got your own well even if it isn't a well at all. That you've got your own tin box, your own notebook, your own gap between 2 loose bricks out in the yard, your own place where you keep what you don't tell anybody, because Miss Ruthie wasn't the only one. Miss Ruthie was one of a great many, And that well of hers belongs to nearly all of us if you sit and think it through. Subscribe to Wisdom of Grandma if you haven't already, because we keep telling stories like this one every week, about older women whose lives never made the papers, but were worth the telling all the same. If this story moved you, give it a like. That's what helps it reach more people, more ears that need to hear it tonight or tomorrow or a week from now. Take care of yourselves out there. Water your basil. Read a page out of the dictionary out loud every now and then. And keep whatever you need to keep. You don't have to tell a soul. Sometimes what you keep is exactly what carries you through to another day, if life allows it. Until next time, take care of the ones who raised you.